Hello, everyone. This is Sasha with the LTRC. Thank you for joining us for the top 5 ways lawyers can improve their clients' experience with our sponsor, Cosmolex Legal, as part of the LTRC Industry Insights series held every Wednesday. Our speaker today is Erica Birstler. Erica Birstler is the Vice President of Cosmolex, developers of the only fully integrated case management, billing, and complete accounting system specifically designed for law offices. Erica's degree is in business administration, and she has nearly a decade of experience in the legal software industry, catering to the specialized technology needs of small to mid-sized law firms. Erica is passionate about helping legal professionals improve the way their law firms run, and she has given numerous presentations across North America on legal technologies such as law practice technology management, cloud computing, and legal billing and trust accounting compliance.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Great, thank you so much, Sasha. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me here today. And what we'll be covering in today's session is a couple of things, but all centering around client experience. So first we'll talk about what factors into your client experience. I think that the perspective is pretty much subjective. You know, what we all feel is a good or bad experience probably differs by person. But I think it's important to understand what factors can contribute to it and hopefully how to get ahead of that and be a little bit proactive in those situations. Then we'll talk about how that client's perspective can impact your business. So it's one thing to, think about what your client thinks or feels. It's another thing to think of, well, how does that impact the business at the end of the day? And it could be impactful from a positive experience, but also negative. And then we'll get into the more of the tips or the main 5 ways that we'll cover today as to how to shift your focus to your client experience and how to improve that going forward. So let's get started then. So the first thing is defining your client experience. So just by definition, it is your client's perspective or their perception, either or, of their experience with your business or your brand. And one thing that I particularly like about talking about client experience is we've all been there. We're all consumers of services, products, and had both good and bad experience with different businesses, and they have influenced our decisions going forward. So I do feel it's a very easy area to relate to, but we need to remind ourselves of that. We need to constantly put ourselves in their shoes and remind ourselves of, if I was having this experience, how would I feel? And it kind of forms a better connection, a better understanding as to whether the situation that's happening is good or bad. So the client's perception of your experience, this starts from the very first interaction, which may be indirectly with your firm. So going on your website, reading a review, maybe seeing an ad, something that you're not actually in physical contact with them, but they're interacting with something, some form of marketing or some other information that you're putting out there. So keep in mind, even if you don't speak to somebody, they're still having experience with your business or your brand. And then it goes into the initial personal interaction. So it could be that initial phone call, maybe an email that was sent in, maybe some sort of like perspective request that might have come through. And that they may be speaking with a receptionist, a legal assistant, maybe a bot if you have some sort of chat or something on your website as well. That is that first initial engagement. What's important with that, though, is they may decide based on that whether or not to proceed. And then that leads into the ongoing. So if they just choose to proceed and work with you going forward, then of course it's the length of your relationship. You know, it still needs to be maintained throughout. If there is a decline in that relationship as the case or the project, whatever you're working on, goes forward, that can actually overshadow that initial engagement. And then lastly is the overall quality of service. Your legal services is your product. So the perceived quality of that service factors into it as well. Again, like I said, if you are working with any business, and we'll kind of pull this in a few times because I still think it's very important to relate to your clients as much as possible. If you're working with a business, whether it is providing a service or selling a product to you, it's not just the product or the service, it's that overall interaction that plays a role. So the big picture is what we're talking about here. All right, so now that we've talked about kind of just identifying the different areas in which the experience can come in, we're going to briefly talk about what is positive versus negative. Like I said, it is fairly subjective, but if you think of yourself of when you've had a positive experience with a business or when you have had a negative experience, likely it's very similar to what your clients are thinking. So let's start with I kind of put together some feedback, what you would see in maybe a review or an email or even a post online that comes from somebody with a positive experience. When needed, I can reach someone in a reasonable amount of time. Accessibility. That's an important part of providing a service to your clients. Doesn't mean you have to be available 24/7, 365, but is it within reason? Are they waiting days or weeks to hear back from you? Or are they feel like you're being attentive to their case? I feel recognized as a valued client. Though you probably have hundreds of clients, your client feeling like they matter and are a priority to your firm is very important. Staff is welcoming, and I feel heard when asking questions or voicing my concerns. As you know, you can have clients of all different ranges. You may be the first lawyer they've ever had. They may have never interacted with the legal industry prior to this. They might have a lot of questions, concerns, or need clarifications. And just having that understanding, I could tell you from my perspective, years ago, I worked in retail. I think probably everybody has worked in either retail or service at some point, is you have to pretend isn't the right word, but you have to understand that each client that you bring in is a fresh experience. No matter what went on for you that day, that week, that month, no matter how many other clients that you work with, that person has one experience with you, and you want to treat it as a unique experience and make sure they do feel welcomed, because that factors into comfort. The more comfortable I am with maybe be the staff or the person I'm working with can impact how the relationship moves going forward. And trust. I trust this business to do what is best. You would hope that your clients have trust in you. Trust is built or earned, I should say, from kind of everything else that we're talking about here. So they all kind of factor into each other. But if I trust a business, then there's a lot of other benefits that can come from that, which we'll talk about. So now the negative is really just the flip side. We won't spend too much time on this because I'm sure you can imagine the opposite of everything I just talked about. These are things we're trying to prevent is I can never get in touch with anyone. They never call me back. I'm just another client. They don't care about my particular situation. Maybe the staff is rude and they don't feel comfortable asking questions or concerns. The big one with this is if they don't feel comfortable, you're not going to get the appropriate feedback in order to improve that experience either. So ensuring that they feel heard and that open communication, which we'll talk about in a bit, is very important. And I cannot trust this business. That's probably the worst thing that a business can hear, that their client that they're working with does not trust them. You work very hard in any relationship in your life, personal or business, you work very hard to earn somebody's trust. So that's the last thing that you want to start hearing. And like I said, the tricky part about experience is only a select few will actually voice their thoughts. If we got this type of feedback, whether positive or negative, from every single person we interacted with, that would be amazing because we would know exactly where we stand with that person and we would know how to improve in different areas or what to continue doing that's working well. So you may have a lot of clients that feel this way, but have not verbalized it to you. So part of what we'll be covering is also how to be proactive, assuming that there are some clients that are having this type of experience, how to be proactive to prevent it, but also how to collect honest feedback so that you know where your business stands. And now the impact on the business. So of course, we all want to have a great client experience, but at the end of the day, how does it impact my bottom line? How does it affect my business? And sometimes this helps thinking about how it impacts like the financials of the business especially, can help prioritize things like client experience. I worked in a small business my entire career, and I know very often the maintenance and the customer service side of a business sometimes falls short because a lot of time and attention is on more of the marketing or the sales side of things because that's associated to money. Not the case. There's many parts to a business that contributes to its success. So why is it important to have a good client experience? First off, most of you don't have cases that are quick process in and out. Usually it's the start of an ongoing long-term relationship, and the impact of your various interactions, even at the very beginning, can carry on through the length of the case. If there's a really bad start at the beginning, there's no trust built or there's an issue there, it can continue to affect that. Now, it can be corrected. If there's a negative experience and it's understood and maybe there was a mistake or misunderstanding or miscommunication, it can be corrected and that trust can be regained, but it has to be prioritized on your end. Unhappy clients lead to disputes or non-payment. So ultimately, you want to be paid for the work that you do. But again, think of yourself when you've been dissatisfied with a service or a product. Maybe if you're at a restaurant, depending on how severe the circumstances are, you might dispute payment, or you might ask for a manager, or you might be so dissatisfied that you walk out. You know, who knows what the situation could be, but you know what it takes for yourself personally when something is of a certain level of dissatisfaction, what ramifications are there for you or what consequences that you put in place. Also, in addition to non-payment, this can take up a lot of time and resources of your team and just strain the relationship long-term. So it's not just the physical money that you might not get, it's the time and resources as well. Return business. If you specialize in multiple areas or in a certain area that can have return business, it kind of depends, or maybe a general practice, that return business is a separate revenue stream for you. A client's initial experience will dictate whether or not they think of coming back. Again, think of yourself. When you had a negative experience with a particular business, were they at the top of your list to go back to them? Think of a doctor, your dentist, you know, all these different services that you interact with. A bad experience can have a pretty large impact. And that, of course, impacts you're not getting that future business. And referred business. Referrals is free marketing. Honestly, it's the best kind of marketing, also known as word of mouth. Hearing a really positive or raving review from a trusted source, that actually pulls a lot of weight. And that's not just your friends or family, but also widespread support on social media. That's a very important part we want to bring up, because you could have either a really positive reputation online or a negative reputation online. And clients have a much louder voice than ever before that could be used for good or not for good. And sometimes you can't control that, but you could do everything you can to ensure that you're doing your part in ensuring they have a positive experience, and hopefully as a result, resulting in positive word of mouth, whether it's in person or online. Your perceived reputation, so not what you think your reputation is, what others think it is really important in gaining business, but also factors into possibly losing business. So now that we talked about just the overall client experience, I'm curious to hear from you all. So if we could just go ahead and launch that poll. Okay, let's take a look at these. All right, so 80% says positive based on what I'm seeing and hearing, followed by not sure, do not know. And then a few of you, 5%, have data to support it. The good thing is, doesn't seem that anyone's having or believes they have a negative client experience. However, the eye-opener here is positive based on what I'm seeing and hearing. So the challenge there becomes, is that an accurate measurement of your client experience? Are you just hearing from the positive people? Are you just hearing from the people that are having, you know, raving reviews. And we get this too as a business. Sometimes we get all this positive feedback and we're thinking, well, not everyone has a perfect experience. There's going to be those that struggle. Why are we not hearing from them? Because that feedback is also just as valuable. All right, so let's get into our tips now. So our first tip that we're going to talk about, and this again, as we mentioned, the client experience starts from their very first interaction with your website all the way to the closing of your relationship. And that could be years after a matter's closed, because like I said, recurring business can be a thing as well. So the first step with any interaction is to set those clear expectations. It is critical to ensure that everyone's on the same page. And I know that might seem obvious, but one of the best ways of doing that is through your either retainer agreements, engagement letters, contracts, whatever documentation, because that will say in writing, obviously, scope of work, maybe any limitations you have, fee schedules, how disputes are handled, and also any unique requirements of your business. So it's important that you get that documented, but also walk them through it. Try to sit with them and explain it in layman's terms. Don't just give them a document and call it a day. Explain to them what these things mean. Like I said, you may have a client who's never worked with a law firm before. So taking that little bit of time just to walk them through what the expectations are and say, are we understood here? That can actually prevent a lot of issues down the line. And defining the main point of contact. A lot of what we talk about today involves good communication. So you want to clarify the process for reaching out. Who is the best point of contact for them? It could be a lawyer, paralegal, somebody else at the firm. Determine who that person is, because that will help reduce confusion and also frustration, because they'll have a single channel. They'll know who to speak to, who to reach out to. Could be by phone, email, whatever you decide. But it's a great way for them, as we mentioned before, to feel heard, to know that they're talking to the right person and they're likely to get a response back. So how do we help with setting these clear expectations, or how does technology help in general? A few things that you can keep in mind, which you may already be doing. Newer firms, especially if either you haven't drafted these types of agreements before or you want to do a much better job at it, there's a lot of online samples that can cover the basics. They help you to at least have that structure where, different sections that you want to cover, and then you can fill in the detail. But if you're seeking that structure, go ahead and look for these online samples. Even if you've been doing this for years and years and years, I want to stress that retainer agreements drafted 20 years ago are not the same as what should be drafted today. There are many other things that factor into a client relationship, so you want to make sure to refresh it every once in a while. Use document templates for standardized language. Anytime you are using a standard document for any of your clients, try to create a template. It is not just time saving, opposite of time consuming. It not only saves time, but it results in standardized language. So you're not wondering, well, what did I say for this person versus that person? On the core statements. Yes, there might be tweaks here and there, but the core foundation of that documentation should be fairly standardized across the board. And look for tools that can assemble into those templates. So templates are great from an efficiency perspective as well. But if you have, let's say, a standardized retainer agreement for your divorce cases, well, use either a document assembly tool that's specifically for that, or some practice management tools as well. Have a way of just saying, okay, I have my fields in the document, just fill it on in. And I'm sure many of you have done that in the past with mail merge tools and stuff like that. Extend that to all the documentation that should be standardized in your firm. And that will help consistency so that you make sure that all the bases are covered. The second item, which I believe might be where many of you are struggling, or everybody struggles in general, is having a pulse on the front office. So typically with any business, there is a front office and a back office. It's kind of split in two. The front office consists of any client-facing activity, reception, meetings, just the interaction between the staff and clients. Just as it states, front facing or front office is what is facing your client, what they interact with on a day-to-day basis. I think often we get very caught up in working in the business and not looking at it from the outside perspective. So someone in your firm should be responsible for having a pulse on this type of activity, not just the volume, but the quality. So you want to have a standard for your business. Different things like how many calls are going to voicemail? How many are actually picked up? How many calls happen off hours? Are all emails being addressed? How long does it take for a response to happen? What's the average response time on certain emails? Whatever your standard is, and there are industry standards in terms of customer success in general, are they being met? And if not, what can be done differently? So actually having measurements or idea of what is needed to do the best you can on the front office end. And some things that can help with that. First off, voice over IP. I'm a big fan of this. I personally work in a business where we're on the phone with clients all the time. So we use our VoIP system to help provide call data, how many calls, the length of those calls, what was missed, how many voicemails, and some further analysis. So you could see, it does not something you have to do every day, but like once a quarter, maybe look at the data and see, how are we doing here? Are we where we want to be, or are there ways that could improve? Maybe you need to increase staff. Maybe you need to have some sort of off hours phone service. You can decide what will resolve that, but you need the data to let you know where you are. Detailed call logs. Make it a part of your culture for everybody in the firm to take detailed notes of every call that they have. I probably don't have to explain to you how important that is to the legal case itself, but also from the client experience side so that you know exactly what was communicated no matter who it was with. If you are a larger firm and you have high inbound volume or calls, look into ticketing platforms. There are customer service tools where every call can create a ticket, every email can create a ticket, and then it's a lot easier to have somebody just prioritize the tickets, make sure they're addressed, and that they're closed in a reasonable amount of time. And maintain a centralized record. Any communication that happens, there should be, and I stress centralized, a place that's accessible to everyone where they could see the phone conversations no matter who they're with, the email communication no matter who it's with, any notes, all across the board, because that communication will really fill in the gaps if there's a dispute or an issue or a concern, or it might raise a red flag. Our next item is maintaining open communication. So this is totally cliche, and I get that. When you have any type of relationship, good communication is the key to success, as we all say. But good communication does not always mean more communication. Considering you have, like I said, maybe hundreds of clients, you want to communicate more effectively. So the client still gets the same information and the same interaction, but it's not taking up loads of your time because it's done in a more effective or efficient manner. Silence, radio silence. And again, you probably experienced this yourself. If there is nothing to report or their calls are not being returned, they could perceive it as they're paying you to do nothing. Likely not the case, but again, it's about perception. What perception are you leaving your client with, and how can you, even if it's just a quick touch point here and there, how could you help? And just like you establish a primary point of contact for your firm, think of the client as well. Phone tag and missed emails, they impact your communication. If you're playing phone tag for 2 weeks, nothing has actually been communicated. So establish the preferred times. Maybe they work, maybe they have pickup times for their kids at school. Just make a note so you're aware of it. Methods to reach out. If it's a couple, maybe there's one person that's better to reach out than another. Should it be by email, by phone, where the quickest response comes from, and just treat each client individually and try to work with their preferences to improve that communication. Some items to help with that. During your client intake, capture, as I said, best hours, methods to contact. Does that mean you're going to follow them all the time? No, not everybody has the time to say, well, I'm going to wait 4 hours to call Jane because that's the best time for her. But it does help. If you're struggling to get in touch with somebody, you can refer back to those notes and say, hey, maybe the reasons why is because I'm calling at the same time every day, and that's when they pick their kids up from school. And I should try to do it in the morning or at a different time. Use automated checklists. So you can have tasks or even events on a calendar. A lot of practice management tools or even Outlook provide these types of features that you can actually schedule touch points. Sometimes time is irrelevant. Like you don't even know that 3 weeks have passed or 4 weeks have passed. So having those touch points, you decide how often you should be touching base with that person, but scheduling those, whether it's yourself or whoever their point of contact is, and they can decide if it comes up as a reminder and maybe they happen to talk to them yesterday because they called in, then maybe they won't touch base with them at that time. But just having that reminder that, hey, it's been 2 weeks or hey, it's been however long, reach out, touch base, see what they think. Consider virtual check-ins. I think now with video conferencing becoming a lot more common and even an expectation in many service businesses, try that. Maybe once a month or however frequent you think is needed, have a video call, 15-minute video call, touch base, how are you doing? It is more interactive than a phone call because you see body language, you have eye contact, but it's less time consuming than a meeting. A meeting is a lot harder to schedule. It takes time out of your client's day to come to and from the office. So it's something to consider. I think often it's thought that, well, I can't meet with my client every month. That's just too much. Well, a video check-in might be that like nice meeting in the middle. And draft invoices from your client's perspective. A lot of the questions, concerns, interactions from the client end happens when billing happens. So try to think from their side, be as detailed as you can, yet concise, so that they have their questions answered before they even ask them. Collecting client feedback. So any feedback, as I mentioned, is good feedback. If your client is dissatisfied or upset, don't brush it off, hear them out, and understand if there's anything that can be done differently. Nobody's perfect. There's always improvements that can be made. So you want to take the bad just as much as the good. Provide surveys. So these next 2 points are related to surveys. While you don't want to bombard your clients with emails, maybe have an easy way to submit feedback by email or maybe on your website so that we have actual data. That's one thing that per the survey or per the poll, a lot of you don't have. So to ensure you have the right data to actually say our clients are doing well or not well. And ask for a net promoter score. So that is basically the question, how likely are you to refer this business? Usually it's out of 8, it's out of 10 or out of 100. Your goal usually is to get around an 8 or 8 out of 10 or 80 out of 100. That is a goal for most businesses. And the results might be surprising once you start collecting that. And also those that rate you high, you may be like, oh, wow, this is a great resource for future referrals. Let's continue to nurture those relationships and see what we can do going forward. And it is exceptionally, actually first before that is you want to post these reviews. So obviously with permission granted by your clients, share your positive feedback wherever possible. By doing these surveys and asking for reviews, that gives you an actual piece of content that you can share on many different platforms. And as we always talked about, low cost, effective, having that trusted feedback. You all know if you go on Amazon or other sites and you're looking for the feedback of other people, it's quite impactful. So you want to send online surveys, including that net promoter score question. If you're not already, that's very important. Maintain a database of your client satisfaction. So know who's happy, not happy, struggling, maybe a risk of firing you. It happens. You want to have that awareness. And maintain a review section on your website if you have not already. And I know we're up on time, so we'll cover this last point quickly. The last one is just valuing convenience. I think that as consumers, we all love convenience. It factors into our overall experience. It also has a lot of weight when looking at competition. If I'm looking for a new doctor, I search for those with an online bill pay, online portal because that's important to me and that actually can factor into my decision. So having those conveniences and advertising them can help bring in more business and also keep your current business very happy. And this past year technology has really taken over. I'm sure you've been made aware of many more tools, improvements, new technology, or technology that's not necessarily new, but might be new to you, you can implement, and now's the time. So here's our final points on what to keep in mind with convenience. So video conferencing, consider it an ongoing option. If you are, instead of meeting with your client, you can elevate your phone calls by including video conferencing, and you can make your meetings more efficient by maybe simplifying them to video conference calls. So every situation warrants a different interaction, but start to actually fold in video conferencing a little bit more. Utilize functions like a secure client portal. A lot of practice management tools have them. Some document management tools have them, where your client can go on a website, see items that they've shared, and even, which is part of the next points here, you can deliver your invoices electronically, you can message with them, online payments from there, e-signature from there. So the whole landscape has changed in regards to how consumers interact with businesses, and these conveniences are going to start to be commonplace. It used to be, oh, that's a nice modern perk. Now it's kind of part of the expectation. So look more at these convenience options if you're not using them already, and see how you can implement them more in your business. So like I said, I want to thank you all for joining. For those unfamiliar with Cosmolex, it is a cloud practice management tool which combines your front office and your back office activities. So if you'd like to learn a little bit about how Cosmolex can help improve your overall client experience, feel free to visit cosmolex.com.
That is all the time that we have for today. I would like to thank our sponsor, Cosmolex, and all of you for attending our webinar today as part of the LTRC Industry Insights Series. If you are curious about future webinars, please check out the ABA LTRC page or follow our Twitter at LTRC for updates. I would also like to thank Erica for presenting today. You can keep up with Cosmolex at Cosmolex Legal on Twitter or cosmolex.com. We will now conclude the webinar. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.